Hi guys, and welcome to episode 3 of The Principles of Dance. Today I have a guest that I'm so excited about, Tereza Theodoulo. Tereza has worked at some of the most prestigious colleges in London. She has created so much work for the ISTD syllabus. I was so lucky to work with her on the new creation of the musical theatre amalgamations for the modern theatre faculty for ISTD. She is just a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure you are going to love listening to her. So hi, Tereza. Thank you so much for joining me on my episode 3 podcast. I am thrilled to have you. How are you?
My absolute pleasure. I'm very well, thank you. Very busy, very tired, but good tired. The tired you get when you know you're achieving. So yes, I'm in a good place.
Oh,
thank
fabulous. So I would love to hear, because, I know you and I feel like I know you well, but I don't feel like I know your entire history. So I would love to hear how you started dancing. What was your training like, your career, the whole thing from start to now?
Okay. How long do we have? Because it's a long time I've been on the okay, so a bit background about me and my heritage. You see the name Theodoulo there. I am Tereza Theodoulo. I'm Greek Cypriot. I was born in London of a Greek family, but the family language was Greek. Didn't speak English till I was 5. So if we were doing this recording 60 years ago, I wouldn't have understood you, and you certainly wouldn't have understood me. But, training dance was my savior. At the age of 5, 6, I went to dance classes because my cousin went, and, it was the local school. And I don't think that I could actually talk an awful lot of English at the time, but I can just remember my teacher, who I'll talk about later, just holding my hand and saying, "Come on now, we're going to skip," and skipping around the room. And that was it. I'd come home. I found my other family, and that was my dance family. And that was the beginning of something absolutely fantastic. I didn't need English as a language. The language of dance was the thing that communicated.
Well, they say it's a universal language, so...
Absolutely. And it's where I felt safe, because at school, I couldn't really communicate too much. But children are resilient, aren't they? Children learn languages like that. I was speaking and doing like drama recitals, reading Peter Rabbit, for the next festival in Enfield, drama and speech and drama festival. So yeah, I think it wasn't too much of a hardship, and it certainly gave me that realization that in order to get to the next level of acceptance, you've got to learn, you've got to progress, and you've got to become like everyone else, and then try and find your niche to where you need to go. So yeah, that was an interesting start. My teacher was Joyce Briggs, who was an ISTD examiner. I was, very fortunate to have her as my first teacher. And from that, I studied RAD ballet and then ISTD, and I danced all the way through. I stayed on at school to do A-levels, purely and simply because my school was only 15 minutes away from home, and my dance school was 15 minutes. I had this little triangle, so my day was on a Toblerone, on a triangle of going from one to the other. And doing A-levels meant that, you could have a morning off or an afternoon off, and I was off to the studio each time. So that was, for me, it was an action that I took at the age of 14. I knew I wanted to dance. So at 16, I decided A-levels, let's see where we go. I did want to go to college. And this is another twist in the tale. From that very Greek background, we spoke Greek, we ate Greek, we thought we lived Greek. And within that society, bearing in mind that my parents had immigrated in the 50s, so their psyche was still in 1950s mode of what the Greek culture was. So that was very strict, arranged marriages. I didn't have one, by the way, but they did try.
Really?
Arranged marriages. And yeah, all of that, which, you know, I'm not that old, but that culture was still very, very strong in the 60s, 70s when I was growing up. I just was not allowed to go to dance college because it would ruin me. It would spoil me. And no Greek man will want to marry you. So that was that. And that led to a lot of emotional anxiety. I became not quite obese, but I was maybe 4.5, 5 stone heavier than I am now. And that sort of obviously put restrictions on my dancing, and I would binge and then I would diet and then I would binge and I would diet. So unhealthy. At the time, people didn't know as much about eating disorders as we do now. My mother was incredible. I went from that to being anorexic. All of the problems, I mean, that's another podcast, all of the problems that involved. But that was through depression, and that was, as we know, eating disorders are a mental concern, and it's how we cope with or not cope with pressures that life throws on us. So through the frustration of not being able to go to dance college, and I wanted to go to Bird College, that was my dream. I then decided, okay, I'll take a teaching program instead. But all along, since the age of about 15, 16, I'd been assisting my teacher and I loved it. I did love it. And all along I've been performing. So it was this roller coaster I was on, doing everything and still studying, still performing, still doing everything. But it was everything. It wasn't focused enough. So the decision was made for me. I had to teach, which once that was accepted, my weight leveled out, my focus was secure. I was, you know, on a mission, as it were. So I did 4 associates in this. This is ISTD, in case some of our listeners don't know the system that I trained in. I did 4 associates. I did 3 licentiates and 2 fellowships, all in 4.5 years. So I think that was quite determined. I'm not sure you could do that now. But from that, I was still performing. And at that time of being overweight, I would go to auditions and I would hear the casting directors say, the fat girl's good. And then someone else would say, yes, but she's so fat. So I didn't get the jobs that I was going for. All the time, obviously, depending on where my weight was, I would get a job and then I wouldn't. So I decided to start my own company. So I had my own musical theatre company. All the time I was training, all the time I was doing external classes, as well as teaching and developing my own teaching qualifications. I would be at the Pineapple. I would go to any congress, any external courses, free open jazz classes. I went to the Place at Contemporary, London School of Contemporary Dance, and I did a course on choreography, and it opened up my mind and it made me think, okay, you need to rethink this. It made me very uncomfortable. It made me think, okay, everything I've learnt so far, I need to throw out the window and start again. A big turmoil, a big questioning period of what am I doing? Am I doing this correctly? And it all sort of coincided with working towards licentiate and fellowship. And I was just constantly constantly trying to find new ways of thinking. I didn't realise at the time, but it was apparently something called ambition. At the time, I just thought, it was what everyone did. That, you have an idea of this is what you want to do and you do it. So basically, I went on from there, teaching. I was invited to teach at Bush Davis, which was the big college of the time, with Daphne Peterson. And I had to turn it down because I'd moved to Newcastle. And when I came back from Newcastle, I wanted to go there, but the college was closing down. So at that point, Mrs. Ashcroft and Daphne Peterson decided I ought to go and teach at London College. London College was the teacher training college of the ISTD. Right. And I was literally just told, oh, you need to go there.
You go.
So I said, okay, I'll do that. I'll just uproot and go. So Mrs. Ashcroft was chair of the modern faculty for 25 years of the ISTD. Daphne Peterson was her sort of second in command, and she was head of modern dance at Bush Davis. Daphne Peterson taught people like Doreen Bird College, Betty Lane Theatre Arts, and a multitude of others.
Wow.
And I was, as part of my training, I was a sort of day release girl. I used to go to Daphne Peterson to be mentored through fellowship and then through new syllabi, etc., etc. So she sort of took me under her wing and kept me there until she was no longer here, which was an incredible honour and something I've always held dear to my heart. Yeah. So yes, from that point, I went to work at London College, and then I got a call from Betty Lane to say, are you free any time? And I said, well, I could be. So I ended up teaching 1 day at Lane's and 4 days at London College, which was the most incredible experience. I was, and still dancing at the time. I was in my sort of upper end of my 20s here. 26, I started teaching at London College, which was quite young. Yeah. At the time to be teaching full-time training kids for, teaching career. And I also encouraged a lot of the students there to try for a performing career at the same time. Yeah. So that was fascinating. Working at London College, focusing on teaching skills, focusing on getting everyone into a mindset that would keep them focused on the track of education. And then at Lane's, it was all the amazingness of performing, which was another branch. So I think it was really great that I was doing the teaching side and the performing side. And then I was invited to become an examiner. And that was a shock and a half. So I said, okay then, as you do. And I trained, and for a little while, I was the youngest examiner in the country. I'd started examining at 27, which we can barely sort of see anyone that does that now. Yeah. And that was, again, I was mentored by Daphne and Mrs. Ashcroft. Then I met my husband, and I had to move to Kent because I could pick up and move my work, whereas he was a head of faculty at a technical college teaching arts and creative arts. Just a few things in common there. So I moved to Kent, and the principal of London College, Pat Whittock at the time, said, you should go and teach at Bird's. So she phoned Miss Bird, who was a governor of London College, and said, you've got to take this girl. So, again, I was told to go, and so I did. And Miss Bird was incredible. And I ended up teaching at Bird College for 27 years, wow. In between making a few babies, just two children. And that was another life-changing moment for me, being mentored by Doreen, who would give you challenges and say, right, you're going to choreograph in the show and you're going to do this, and you'd go, okay, and you'd do it, and she'd be there and she would feedback and she would mentor and she would advise. I'll talk about her later with regards to my ideals on teaching and teaching teachers, but she influenced me an awful lot. And well, a lot more. Another sort of side to my career as an examiner and then as a creator of the syllabi that is now examined. And then from that, I was chair for the modern faculty. I was on committee since 2003 and I became chair in 2017. And now we don't have a committee with a chair anymore. We have a committee that is helped along by our head of faculty development. So there's an awful lot of work that's done internally. And my latest position, I am the international ambassador for the theatre faculties for the ISTD, because I do work so much overseas, but also being Greek, I connect with other people, and I find, again, it comes back to that international language of dance. I've loved teaching overseas. I've loved seeing how different cultures can be embedded into dance. It doesn't have to be, this is the way we do it. It's like, well, this is the way we do it, but you can do it with a bit of that and you can do it with a bit of that. It's all part of that rich tapestry, isn't it? And it's what makes things so much more exciting. So yes, international ambassador. So since lockdown has finished, I've been, this year alone, I've been out to Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Australia, and just before Christmas, I came back from a month in South Africa.
It sounds so glamorous.
Incredible.
Do you get to see the place while you're there, or is it lots of work?
Sorry, I keep shifting about here, and you just get a zoom of my head just to see the natural grey. Do I get to see the places? So we work 5 days, sometimes 6, and then we get a day off, and then it goes that way. So we do get a day off, and we do, some of our days are short, so you can go out and maybe see a museum or a display or something. The amazing thing is the teachers are so great. They take you to, well, I was taken to see a vineyard in South Africa. I didn't have any wine, but, it was lovely to be in those surroundings and enjoy the culture. I had one day off where I did a tour down the peninsula of the Cape, which was incredible, a bit of a whirlwind. And I saw penguins and I saw ostriches and I saw fantastic, amazing way of life, and seeing all the arts and culture and the crafts places. And I think I'm a bit of a magpie. If I see things, I bring home bits. My house is full of ornaments and pottery and
memories. I love that.
Which, I say, oh yes, I got that in Finland, and I got that in
That's like our Christmas tree. Our Christmas tree is little trinkets of things we've collected over the years. So I love getting the Christmas tree out because it's loads of little memories. It's gorgeous.
You get an opportunity to relive those moments every time you look at it.
Absolutely. So there's so much I want to go back on here. But the first thing I'm going to say is I think the stars definitely aligned for you in terms of teaching being your main path, because you are, for those who don't know, you've taught at all these amazing colleges, so you've left your footprint on so many people's lives. But for those who don't know you, should try and get to one of your classes or be tutored by you, because you are phenomenal. And I know
you're very kind.
No, you are. And anyone who's had a class with you will be able to back me up on that. You're so inspirational, and it's just so obvious that you were born to do what you do. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge. I've learned so much from you, and I can't wait for my students to watch this podcast, because I'm always throwing your name in the mix, and I'm like, but especially when I'm teaching Advanced 1, because I did the course with you. So I'm always, and you should see Tereza do this. And, so I feel like they know you. So the stars definitely aligned for you. I'd like to go back, if I may, to what you said about the struggles you had with your weight, because I think this is probably, something that all us dancers kind of go through. I know when I was training, I wasn't made to dance. I haven't got the long legs and the traditional dancer's body. But I would be at the ballet bar, stood behind people who did, with their legs up there, and I'd be the one really fighting for it, But it does have an impact, I think, on you.
Yeah.
So I think, I'd just like to discuss what impact that had on you and how that then maybe influenced your teaching, and how we can maybe support our dancers with those struggles that they might be having.
Absolutely. It's an area that I'm passionate about, having struggled and been affected by the effects of it's a mental condition, a mental illness, and it's, as I said earlier, it's now far more recognised. I think I didn't have all the pressures of social media. And I think if at the time that was in existence, I don't think my recovery would have been as successful as it was. So to start off by saying, as teachers in this society and in this this time period of our social development, I think we have so many more challenges to face with our students. They are bombarded with images, they're bombarded with information. They can get anything online, they can be followed, they can follow anyone. And no matter how much we try as parents and as teachers to guide our children, pupils, students, to be wary of what they have access to, it's almost like they don't have control, because it's what's the word? It's constant. It's constant. It doesn't stop. And they're just victims of it. So having said that, over the years, it affected me in as much as I was never good enough. Like you, because I was not the right shape, I sort of struggled with the image. I have lordosis, so my pelvis is always on an anterior tilt. My sacrum is on that angle. And if you're just slightly overweight, then, the muscle, the fat, the meat, the flesh that's around there, your bottom, is much bigger. And by the fact that your tail is sticking out, the bigness of your bottom is bigger. So think of me as a dancer in the 70s when everyone was stick thin and it was fashionable to not have a bottom. So from that, all I can say is thank you, Beyonce, because she made big bottoms fashionable. So
and the Kardashians.
At least that, yes, less of a pressure there. Just, a little bit too far with the Kardashians there, but that's another one. So the image is, they're bombarded with it all the time. It's relentless. That was the word I was looking for. I knew it would come back. It's relentless. So for me, it was, trying to get my head around, well, I'm not like that, so I'd better tap into what I am like. And for me, comedy and acting, and you know me, I do accents and all the rest of that as well. So that was my outlet in theatre, and also bringing that into my classes when I teach. That was something that helped me cope. I finally got in control of that when things in my life became more stable.
Right.
And that affected my eating disorder. Having said that, I still have the mind of someone with problems with my weight. I still weigh myself far too much. I look in the mirror without clothes on far too much. And I'm at that stage in my life. I probably got to this stage about 20 years ago, so in my 40s, that, okay, that's who you are.
Yeah.
That's who you are. Accept it. You don't have to give into it. You don't have to get, manic and obsessive about what you're eating. And my motto has been to be healthy. I still look at myself and like it when I'm thinner. But I know when I am too thin, it's too much.
So when I'm in the studio teaching, I mean, I'm up and down all the time. It's interesting that you said once you got to about 40, because I'm approaching 40, and I've kind of made peace with who I am. However, when I am teaching, when I have time to myself and I can train and I can get my yoga in and I feel stronger, I enjoy teaching more. When I feel like I've, not had time to myself because I've been looking after everybody else and I don't feel as strong, I don't enjoy standing up and physically teaching as much because I don't like what I see in the mirror. I think this kind of crosses over to something else we'd like to talk about today, with that thing of the maturing body as well. Because when I was a younger teacher, I was up and I would be going as full out as the class to try and lift their energy. And then when I kind of got in, my dance teachers would say, oh, I used to be able to get my leg up there. And I used to think, really? That will never be me. I'll always be able to kick my leg that high. I'll always be able to. But once I started getting into my 30s, I was like, actually, I understand what they were saying now. Everyone else is getting more flexible, the kids. I'm starting to get less flexible. And it was a really hard thing to deal with. Have you experienced similar things?
Absolutely. So my body, once I got my head sorted out and I was on track and everything was, I understood my body, I understood my physicality. And that's in itself has gone through 3 or 4 different changes depending on where I've been and what I've been doing. Can I just pop in a little bit of information?
Yes.
When I was 29, I went to New York and I lived in New York. I went with Katie Morea, who has Morea Performing Arts College. I taught Katie as a child and then we became incredibly close. And wherever I taught, she was sort of my assistant and we worked up together. And then she's just a phenomenal talent herself. But we went to New York and we studied at the Alvin Ailey. Now that was the biggest change in my life ever. Studying there with incredible people, doing class with a Martha Graham technique with a woman who'd actually danced in the Graham Company. Wow. Walking past Alvin Ailey in the corridor and, hello ladies, how are you doing? And I'm like, being in that environment, working with the students there, and we brought a different energy into the classes because of our jazz and the influences of Luigi, who's an amazing jazz teacher in New York, and he'd worked with Molly Malloy, who then came to England, and there was this big American European crossover in the 80s. And I was sort of part of the end of that. And just having that experience in New York gave me a different look completely. I came back and my body was different. It was sculpted. I knew my muscles and worked differently. And that just forced this amazing energy in my teaching. And at that point, I think that was the start of my acceptance of where my body was. It was also part of this repush and realign and work differently with my body. And I retrained my body, basically. And I made peace with that. And then over the years, working with Katie, with Lynn Richardson, with Sarah Wilson, a fantastic group of ladies on our creative development, we created the grades now for the ISTD, and then went on to do the advanced one, advanced 2, then the advanced 1. Through that process, going through the anatomical detail, as you know, that's, what really excites me, of getting people to be confident and comfortable and finding how their own body works. That's fascinated me, because I've had to cope with different elements in my body, and it's fascinated me being able to help other people find that as well. Great. I hit my peak at 42. I was there. It was amazing. And then 43, 44, it started to hurt, and it never hurt before. And I can remember teaching advanced 2 modern at Chichester. We have a big international summer school for the ISTD. And after I'd taught an advanced 2 class, the teaching faculty were all together in a social setting. And I just chatting, I said, God, that advanced 2 is really, really beginning to hurt now. And Christina Ballard, who I adore, who is, 12, 13 years older than me, took umbrage at my comment and said, what do you mean it hurts? You can still do it. Your legs are still up by your ears. You can still dance like anything. And I said, yeah, but when I used to do that last year, it didn't hurt. This year it's hurting. And she said, well, you should just be lucky that your legs go up. Mine never did. I mean, we all joked. It was funny. But
Yeah.
I actually thought, yeah, but no one realizes that it feels different.
Feels different.
And that was the sort of slow and steady start of things, tick this one, that one's gone, that one's gone, that one's gone. And I went through a period of about 10 years of coming to terms with that. And it was almost like grieving. It was like grieving the loss of my body. So, when you lose someone you love and they've gone, but they're still in your mind, they're still in your memory. You can still see them, hear them, feel them. Certain smells, certain musics bring those people back. I've still got that. I can still remember my body.
Yeah.
And I tap into that. The way I cope with it now, it took me a long time. The way I cope with it is by tapping into that memory of what it felt like and celebrating that flavor, if you like, by recalling it and trying to get that same sensation out of people I teach. Yeah. I did go through my, this grieving period that I said, of feeling incredibly embarrassed, because each time I would try something, it wouldn't happen the way it used to. So I would do less and less, which then meant I was weaker and tighter. And each time it was a, vicious circle. I was in a catch-22 situation. The less I did because I was embarrassed, the weaker and more out of condition I was. So I had to give myself quite a few talkings to. I had to read and study and learn about the aging body and accept. And I had to learn to reuse my body in a different way. And one thing I say to young teachers now is, while you are still capable, while you're teaching, embrace your physicality to the absolute maximum. Yeah. I say you should have at least one point in every lesson where you're demonstrating something for your students where you actually feel a buzz. Yeah. It feels that there's nothing like it. There's that absolute, this is the best feeling in the world. I could fly.
Yeah.
And you should still get those moments. And if you're not getting those moments, then you have to tap into it.
That's really interesting to hear, actually. I took my students over to Vegas to compete in the Dance Awards. I think it was in 2011. I can't remember when the other one was. It was a bit more recent. But their competitions are amazing. Their judges become tutors, and everyone takes class with them, and they have teachers' classes. And I think it was a Mark Miesmer class. And he just turned around to us teachers, and, there was a different age range of teachers in the class. But he just complimented everyone on how much joy we looked like we had. And he said, do you still dance with your students? Because you absolutely must. Because even if you don't feel like you used to, the joy that you're showing and that love of dance, the students need to see that. So that's really nice that you kind of said the same thing there. But I think it is important because, you know, nothing is as joyous to watch as passion, is it? So, you know, your legs might not be up there, but if you've still got that love in your heart and you're demonstrating that, they need to see it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, you know, there's so much psychology in teaching, as we know, as you know, I know you know, because we've worked so closely. And I just want to say to your listeners at this point that Nazine is incredible, and I get such a buzz out of working with her. I'm on a bit of a roll at the moment. I'm working with Nazine on her licentiate, and actually all I'm doing is guiding her. I'm not teaching her anything. I'm just helping her realise how fantastic she actually is. I'm working with a lady in Athens who is about to take her fellowship exam, who was a student of mine at Bird College, and I've watched her career and her development over the years. I've been back and forward to Athens and seen how she's grown as a teacher. She's still performing with her students, 37, still dancing up there on stage and still looking great. And I'm also working with another lady that I had 15 years ago started working with through her licentiate and her fellowship mark was 193 out of 200. Of course, I said, what happened to the other 7 marks? Who is an incredible lady. And she's gone back home to Scotland, and she's now teaching teachers that she taught years ago. They did their DDE, so that's the first level of teacher training. And now they all want to do their licentiate. So she's working with them, and it's that joy of passing on. She's now working with me of creating a new licentiate structure. It's that sense of joy you get now from seeing that development in other people. And that's where I'm coming from at this stage in my teaching. And that passing on that passion to others is something you can do until you're 80. You know, you listen to people. Gillian Lynn came to do the awards ceremony at Birds a few years ago, and she was so excited that she kept walking away from the microphone at the podium and then coming back, and everyone was trying to direct her. But she was so passionate, and she just said, I can remember this so clearly, I've got 2 new knees, I've got 3 new hips. Don't worry, I haven't got 3 legs. I've just had one of them done twice. My ankles are not mine anymore, blah, blah, blah. But I still, and you know, she was still doing daily class into her 90s. And I can remember she just said to the students, it was almost like one of those don't do drug moments. She said, I've never understood dancers that have actually taken drugs. She said, for me, the drug is dancing. That's the drug. That's what gets you high. That's what takes you to another planet. And I've never forgotten that. I think it's so true. You sit there and you hear someone that amazing say that, and you think, yeah, I can tap into that. Yeah. That's absolutely where I feel that. Yeah. I've forgotten what your question was now. I just went off on one again, didn't I? I don't know whether there was a question. I was just saying, it was nice to hear you say about, I was talking about Mark Miesmer from America, and he was saying. Yes. I was going to say, as young teachers, that's your best tool is your physicality. Yeah. All the knowledge and the explanation comes with experience. It's, you know, it's sort of like a scale. Here you are as a young teacher, and here's your physicality, and here's your knowledge. And then as you become a mature teacher where everything is aligned, your physicality is still fantastic and your knowledge has grown. As you get older, your physicality goes down, but boy, that knowledge is absolutely is golden. And it's about sharing, isn't it? And giving. There's no point in having all this knowledge and this love if you just keep it to yourself.
Of course. Well, on the subject of knowledge, I would like to rob some of your knowledge, if I may. Because you mentioned to me yesterday when we spoke briefly that about one of your roles when you were at Baird College. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So it sort of it happened organically, really. Baird College has always been at the forefront of development in academia. Doreen Bird was really passionate about dancers being thinking people, and crossing all our knowledge over from one subject to another. So what you do in your ballet class stands in your tap class, it stands in your modern class. Everything is a lovely amalgam to be a full, triple threat. With that, what's the word? That nurturing side of Doreen, she created a staff that was naturally nurturing. And as our understanding as teachers has developed, we've become more aware of people's learning difficulties. And in the past, that was, learning difficulties, that belongs in your school, your academic school. When you come to dance, you just get on with it. But as we know, all those difficulties, all those learning challenges that some of our students have a massive impact into the way they learn to dance. Now, I was diagnosed 10 years ago with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a hypermobility condition. It's more than just being bendy. It's where there's two main types. One is vascular, which is quite dangerous. It means your valves and the way that your internal organs actually function can be compromised because you have an excess of collagen. And the collagen, if there's too much of it, everything is stretchy inside. So your organs have got a propensity, like your heart valve. I used to have heart valve scans every year just to make sure that my vascular system was right, was strong and secure. But the type of Ehlers-Danlos I have is where all my muscles, my skin, my tendons, ligaments are all super, super stretchy. Now that can lead to problems with dislocation. That can lead to problems with what feels like repetitive strain because you're using the wrong muscles to work on a particular limb. Like my legs would just go up, didn't know how they got there. So physiologically, just to lift your leg as a human being, just to walk up the stairs, the main muscle group you will use will be your quads, your thighs. So as a dancer with hypermobility, I just instinctively relied on that thigh muscle. I didn't know that's what I was doing. But then that caused problems in the hip sockets, etc., etc. So coming to terms with that, having that late diagnosis, I was also told and had a whole series of tests, like weeks of it in London Hospital in Euston, which was incredible. I worked with the professor that had actually made a big study on Ehlers-Danlos in the 60s, and he has the most authority in the country, and he teaches in Europe, etc. And he told me that, well, of course, let's just do he did a few tests with me, and he said, yes, you've got, your limbs are much longer than your torso, measurements, etc. I had to have my pulse checked and my blood pressure checked while I was sitting, standing, whatever. I have a condition called POTS, which is postural tachycardia, realignment, whatever. It just means when you stand up, you're dizzy.
Wow.
Do I faint? Yes. Dizziness and all of that. So I've understood that. I've also understood in late days that I have dyspraxia, which is a motor neuron sort of dysfunction. It means the messages from my brain don't quite get to the nerve ending. So it's the synaptic. Synapses is just a form of transmission, how the electrical charges in the brain don't quite get to your muscles. So that affects coordination. that affects how you receive information, because it takes much longer for those connections to be made and for the pathways in your brain to become set. So we have this term muscle memory. It actually refers to how your brain remembers the pathways you take. Unbeknownst to me, all these years I've had it, and I just naturally worked out that for me to learn, I have to know things in bite-sized pieces, and I have to repeat it before I've got it, and then I can move on and add the next layer. And because of that, I wasn't quick at picking things up in auditions. I would get jobs in auditions because I would pick up on the energy and the dynamic, and I would know that something amazing was going to happen on the count of 5, and I would be rhythmical and musical. But I brought that into my teaching, that way of teaching in bite sizes, understanding. I worked with the Theatre for the Deaf, so I was very good with people with visual and hearing impairments. I naturally fell into this position of being given students at Birds that needed extra care with dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD, autism. And that for me was a fascinating learning journey. Again, that's what we do. We learn every day, don't we?
Absolutely.
And I just really became so engaged in finding just little improvements on these students in one lesson was massive. Was massive. Even it was just, you can now link this 8 with this 8. And the way I cope with it is I have to tell myself exactly where my weight placement is when I've finished something, to then ask my body what moves next, which is really interesting because that's something that influences the whole way of how I teach anyway. It's I'm all about the initiation and the completion of movement. So where has it started? Which part of your body is going to start that movement, and where is it complete? Does it ever complete really? Where is it then taking you into the next movement? So from a very basic, fundamental, physiological way of moving and understanding how your weight transfers in order to inform the next movement, artistically, it's how does it feel to start it there, and then what's the feeling at the completion of that before it takes you on to the next. It's all about energies and dynamics, and it's how you pocket those little energies and those dynamics for people with learning difficulties, understanding where they need management, where they need help, where they need bite-sized pieces, where they need order, where that repetition comes in more phases of writing lists and ticking off, making sure that you complete something before you go on to the next. And I found that really difficult, and I recognize that because there are similar tropes in all of these learning challenges that our students have. The lack of organization, etc., timekeeping, completion of tasks, letting everything build up before you actually manage to start it because you can't face starting it. A whole lot of study. I've obviously studied a lot, but I've learnt a lot from who I teach and how I teach and how I've needed to learn myself. And I've found that so fulfilling. I have a niece who has autism and her eldest daughter is autistic.
Right.
And seeing how she develops and how her daughter has developed has been amazing. And the whole family, and I mean, there's a lot of us, we all know how to work with that. And it's a celebration, and it's just that joy we get. Again, it all comes back to, it sounds selfish, doesn't it? I only teach dance because it makes me happy. It's that joy we get from seeing those developments in those people that have those challenges is massive.
Yeah.
It's massive. And you've made a difference to someone's life.
This is what we spoke about in the last podcast of just how much of a footprint teaching dance leaves in people's lives. And I know how massive my dance teachers were in my life. And if I only make half the impact they did on mine to other people, then I feel like job well done in the world. So it is very fulfilling, isn't it? Tereza, I could talk to you all day and listen to your knowledge. I feel like this is part one. I feel like we need to do part two.
I'll be up for it.
But yeah, we'll have to leave it there for today. But I so look forward to part two. Thank you so much for giving your time today. If you get an opportunity, I would really recommend spending some time with Tereza. Where can they find you, Tereza? Would it be Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If you go to those two, I'll accept you willingly, happily.
It would be honestly the most beneficial thing you've ever done in your teaching career. Thank you so much, Tereza, for sharing your knowledge with us, and I'll speak to you soon.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone who's been commenting and sending me message about the podcast. I really do love hearing from you all. The winner, as promised, of our either training manual or diary is the Nouveau Theatre School. So thank you so much for your comment. If you would like to win one of our programs, then all you've got to do is send me a message and let me know your thoughts on the podcast. And you can do that on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or simply drop me an Instagram message. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.